everyone, I'm Allison Cherkosly. I'm a seasoned fundraising professional with over 10 years in the field. I have experience in virtually every area of nonprofit development, which helped me become a subject matter expert specializing in developing comprehensive fund development plans. I've put together this series of videos to walk you through how to create and implement a fund development plan for your nonprofit organization. Fund development plans are essential for nonprofits. That doesn't mean that every nonprofit has one, but I assure you that the successful ones do. And that's why I'm here, to help you to create and implement a successful fund development plan. I've worked extensively with nonprofit organizations on their fundraising operations, and I've conducted independent research in the field of philanthropy as well. These experiences helped me create a process for developing unique fund development plans that will help your organization be successful in fundraising. There are 5 steps to my process: evaluating current fund development operations, analyzing the past and strategizing for the future, preparing for implementation, evaluation, and revising the plan. I've developed subtasks for each step, which I'll be covering throughout this video series. Here are some slides with overviews of what we'll be covering throughout these videos. This outlines the steps in my fund development process, but you should feel free to adapt the process to your needs. This may seem overwhelming at first, but don't worry, I'm here with you every step of the way. The process that I show you will work whether you're working with a small nonprofit organization, a college or university, or a hospital. But keep in mind that these video segments are meant to provide you with an overview of the fund development planning process. You'll need to make adjustments based on your organization's goals and needs. The size of your organization will impact how you go through this process as well. So feel free to adapt these steps and subtasks to your needs. The one thing I want you to take away from these videos is the process that I use. It ensures that you make sound choices for your fundraising program that have the best chances of success. Throughout these videos, we'll be following this process for analysis. Data will lead to interpretations, and interpretations will lead to decisions. Before we dive in, I want to provide an overview of some of the terms I'll be using throughout these video segments. First, let's talk about the difference between the term prospect and the term donor. A prospect is someone who hasn't made a gift to your organization, but is a prospective donor, whereas a donor is someone who has actually given a gift. It's important to use the correct terminology for prospects and donors. Now let's talk about the different types of gifts. First, there's unrestricted gifts. These are gifts that are given without being restricted to a specific purpose. Most nonprofits have an annual fund, and the annual fund is where unrestricted gifts go. Unrestricted funds are extremely important to every nonprofit organization because they allow the nonprofit to use the money any way they want. Most donors do not want to designate money to pay staff salaries or administrative costs, but these are essential expenses for nonprofits. Unrestricted gifts, or the annual fund, allows nonprofits to use donor funds for operational expenses. This is different from restricted gifts. Like the name suggests, restricted gifts have a specific designation attached to them. For example, a donor may restrict a gift to provide a scholarship, and the nonprofit organization is always legally bound to use restricted gifts for the purpose dictated by the donor. Another category of gifts are expendable gifts. These gifts must be spent in the same year that they're given, which is different from endowed gifts. Gifts that go towards an endowment are invested by the nonprofit in perpetuity. The distributions from the endowment are spent annually for the donor-specified purpose. Before concluding this segment, I'd like to give an overview of fund development programs and organizational structures. The first type of fundraising program is annual giving. This usually refers to the fundraising activities used to stimulate the annual fund. These funds, like I mentioned, are usually unrestricted and expendable. However, some nonprofits define annual giving differently. I've worked with smaller nonprofits that consider any gift under $500, whether restricted or unrestricted, to be in the purview of annual giving. Regardless of how your organization defines annual giving, the goals are the same: to provide income for the organization's operational expenses, to increase donor participation rates, to get donors in the habit of giving, and identify prospects for major gifts. Major gifts, on the other hand, refer to fundraising activities aimed at securing large gifts, usually for special projects. Major gifts are almost always restricted and are usually at least 20 times the size of annual gifts. Again, different nonprofits classify and define major gifts differently. The important thing is to define the major gift within your organization and stick with that definition. Many small nonprofits consider any gift over $500 to be a major gift, whether or not it's expendable or endowed. Universities, however, usually define major gifts as restricted gifts of $100,000 or more paid within 5 years of the pledge being made. I read one book that compared annual gifts to major gifts by saying it's paying your dues versus giving away your surplus. So it takes a much more complex and personalized approach to give away your surplus and secure major gifts. The goals of the major giving program are to provide income for usually capital projects and endowments, ensure stability for programs and projects within the nonprofit, and to identify prospects for planned giving programs. Planned giving is the practice of raising funds from legacy gifts. Planned gifts or legacy gifts are philanthropic commitments that are made in the present but allocated in the future. This almost always refers to charitable bequests, but also includes other planned giving vehicles that we'll discuss in a later segment. The goals of the planned giving program are to provide revenue for the future, ensure organizational stability, build lifelong relationships with donors, and encourage donors to give more during their lifetimes. These are the different types of fundraising programs that focus exclusively on individual donors. In addition to these programs, there's also corporate giving, which focuses on raising money from for-profit businesses. Small nonprofits usually aim their corporate giving efforts at local businesses, while larger nonprofits, higher education institutions, and hospitals usually look to large corporations for corporate giving. These programs are aimed at building relationships with businesses that might expand beyond philanthropic support, in addition to the philanthropic support they're trying to obtain. Foundation giving and government relations may be combined in the same program as corporate giving. Foundations and governmental organizations give almost exclusively through grants. Therefore, foundation and government giving programs mainly focus on grant writing. However, they also seek to build strong relationships with grant writers and look to expand partnerships. Lastly, special events programs may be considered separate fundraising programs, or it may be combined into another program. Special events are those events that the main purpose is to raise money. The most common type of special events that you've probably been to are galas. While the main goals of these events are to raise money, they're also used as tools to identify new prospects, cultivate current prospects, and raise awareness of the organization in the community. Now that you understand the main fundraising programs, I'll show you some examples of how fund development operations are structured. Frontline fundraisers are the ones who actually conduct the face-to-face solicitations of prospects. On the supporting activities side, we have the programs that are essential to any fundraising operation. I'll explain more about these functions throughout these video segments, but just know that these activities are vital to any fund development operation. On the other end of the spectrum, we have small nonprofits with hardly any fundraising activity. If there's only one fundraising employee, they'll usually be referred to as a director of development and report directly to the executive director. Larger nonprofit organizations will have more fundraising employees, as you can see in this diagram. Hospitals, depending on their size, usually looks similar to this organizational chart, but often with more middle management and supporting activities. Ultimately, the structure of a fundraising organization can look like just about anything. It's important to structure your fund development operation in a way that makes sense for your organization. Well, this wraps up our segment. Just to recap, remember, follow the process. Data leads to interpretations, which leads to decisions. Throughout this video segment series, we'll look at data interpretations, make potential recommendations, and then later on, we'll set our fund development plan. Make sure to understand and use the proper terminology in your fund development plan, and define subjective terms and stick to those terms. Feel free to email me with any questions about this segment. In the next segment, I'll be reviewing the first 2 tasks of the first step of the fund development planning process. Thanks for tuning in.